Hello, econ students. This is the follow-up to our second part of this worksheet here, which is 4B, supply and demand practice. So in that first video, if you watched it, I did a quick overview of the first 6 questions, which were about the athletic shoe market. And what we're going to do now is we're going to turn to part B of this video. So if you flip the page, you should see one that looks like this, very similar to our first one. And it says, analyze the headlines about events affecting a variety of markets. So this one's not going to look at something specific like athletic shoes, but what it is going to look at is different markets and how they are impacted by certain things. So number 1 says, a swarm of insects have killed the world's tomato market. Well, does that sound like it would affect the demand for tomatoes or the supply of tomatoes? So if you look back at your sheet, you should know that based on our 5 demand shifters and our 5 supply shifters, that this is going to affect the supply of tomatoes, right? And technically what it would be, you could probably make the case for efficiency or price of resources. So in general, what happens to tomatoes when the tomato market has been destroyed by, in this case, by bugs? Well, the supply of tomatoes is going to go down, which means that that curve is shifting to the left. So again, let's label our initial equilibrium point here, point A, and now we have shifted to the left with the decrease in the supply of tomatoes, and we've got a new equilibrium point, which I'm labeling right now, point B. So what has happened here in terms of pricing? Well, we've gone from A to B, so we're moving up this y-axis here, which is the price. So price is increasing, price is going up. So I'm going to circle that arrow, the upward arrow. And then the next thing we got to look at is quantity. So again, we've gone from A to B here, and this time we've moved from A to B to the left, which would tell you that the quantity here is decreasing. So we're going to circle the arrow that's going down. I just realized I didn't draw these arrows to show you, but that's the way it is moving. So remember, anytime that quantity moves to the left, it's a decrease. So quantity is going down. And that's it. There's our answer for number 1. Let's take a look at number 2. A recession hits and many consumers lose their jobs. So like with any recession, people are out of work. What does that do to tickets to Disneyland? So as a result, are people going to demand more or less tickets to Disneyland? And I've given it away. I've said it's a demand shifter, right? Now you could argue it could be potentially a supply shifter here, though we'd have more Disney tickets, but Disney isn't necessarily printing more or less tickets per se. And what happens first is that we've got a recession, people have lost their jobs. So our shifter is actually income. We've got a change in income here, and that's a demand shifter. And as a result, if you don't have a lot of money to spend, chances are people are not going to be buying as many Disneyland tickets. So the demand for these tickets is going to decrease, and our demand curve here shifts to the left. So we started here at A, and now we are moving downward. The demand curve is shifting, and we have our new equilibrium point here, which I'll label B, and I'll dot it out here. Okay, so now going from A to B, let me switch markers here. Going from A to B, what's happened to price? Well, we can see that on this graph here, B is lower than A, right? So we started at the price to equilibrium here. We're moving down the y-axis now, right? Because people aren't buying as many tickets. We're moving down this price axis. So price goes down. So I'm going to circle the arrow going down. And then in terms of the quantity of tickets that are being demanded here, right? Well, let's look at what's happening. Again, we're going from A to B, and we're moving to the left here along the x-axis, the quantity axis here. And that tells you that, again, anytime we move to the left, is a decrease. So I'm going to draw that arrow going down. And there we have it. That's the change for number 2. So let's take a look at number 3 here. And I got to turn my page. Number 3 says, the price of computer CPUs tumbles. So central processing units of a computer. It's a part of the computer you need, right? In other words, these CPUs, these central processing units, are now becoming cheaper. What does that do to the computer market? Is this a demand or supply shifter? Well, your average consumer is probably not buying a CPU. That's more of a manufacturing thing. So this is going to be a supply shifter. And specifically, the price of resources here are getting cheaper, so the suppliers can now produce more computers at a lower cost. So this is in fact a supply shifter. So with the resources getting cheaper, the suppliers will want to sell more computers, make more computers to sell, because now they can do it at a lower cost. So our supply curve increases, shifts to the right. Okay, we've got our initial equilibrium there, but now our new equilibrium price is here, point B. Okay, so let me label it here, make sure we do that properly. Okay, so what's happening here in terms of price? That's the first thing we want to look at, price, right? So if we look at our y-axis for price, and we go from A to B, we're moving downward, right? So price is going down. That's a down arrow. I'm going to circle that. Price is decreased as a result of the increase in supply. And the next thing we got to look at is quantity, which I'll put up here. Let's see, put quantity up here. We're moving from A to B, and it's to the right. So remember, anytime that things move to the right here from our starting point, the quantity is increasing. So you would circle the arrow going up. And that's it for number 3. Okay, number 4 says the price of fresh caught salmon skyrockets. So salmon's a fish, and it's getting more expensive. The sea bass market, how does that impact the sea bass market? So what it's asking here is we got 2 different types of fish here. Salmon is getting more expensive. Salmon costs more to buy, right? As a result, what's going to happen with sea bass? Is this a demand or supply shifter? Okay, well, you should be thinking, how does this relate to consumers, right? So if salmon's getting more expensive, what are the consumers going to want? Are they going to want more or less salmon? Well, if it gets more expensive, which it is, they're going to want less salmon, right? So as a result, our shifter here, if we look at our demand box, is going to be a substitute product, so the price of a substitute. And in this case, sea bass is a substitute to salmon because they're both fish, right? So as a result, what happens to the demand for sea bass? Well, sea bass demand is going to increase, right? So as salmon becomes more expensive, people will look for a cheaper fish. In this case, that cheaper fish is sea bass. So the demand for sea bass is increasing here. We're moving from A to B, right? A rightward shift indicating that there is an increase. And, oops, I didn't finish labeling this. Let's draw out the new equilibrium point. Let's make sure we labeled that. Okay, Q1, P sub 1. All right, so what happens to the price of sea bass after the demand for sea bass is increasing, right? Well, that price is going to start to go up as well, right? So we're going from A to B, okay? As demand is increasing, price is moving up as well. And what happens to our quantity that's being demanded here? Okay, well again, we're moving from A to B, and that means we're moving to the right. So anytime we move to the right for quantity, like this axis down here, quantity goes up. So there you go. So both price and quantity for the sea bass market have increased in this example. And what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna erase a couple of these, and we're going to do number 5 and 6 together as well. So let me just go ahead and clean this board off. If you like, you can go ahead and speed up through this part. I'm just going to go ahead and redraw our graphs, and these numbers will change as well. Very high budget here, as you can tell. No editing at all. All right, so let's put up number 5 here, and number 6 over here. Okay, and I'm going to redraw our new graphs, our blank starting points. Demand curve downward, supply curve upward, price on the y-axis here, quantity on the x-axis. I'm just going to put quan. And then we've got our, whoops, looks like it's still a little wet here. I'll let this one dry and I'll move on to this one. Okay, we've got demand going downward, supply going upward, our equilibrium point right here, price on the y-axis, quantity on the x, we're just gonna put quan. Okay, and then we've got our equilibrium price and our quantity equilibrium. All right, let's see if this one's done. Yeah, it looks ready. Quantity equilibrium. price equilibrium. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's see what number 5 says. Number 5 is the government places an excise tax on cigarettes, and in parentheses says cigarette market. So government's placing a tax on cigarettes. What is this going to do to the cigarette market? Okay, so supply or demand shifter. Well, if we go back to our list again, our 5 shifters of demand and supply, one thing that should stand out to you would be government action, or in this case, government subsidies and tax credits. So that is a supply shifter. So if the government is charging cigarette manufacturers more to make those cigarettes, that's going to impact their supply. And if they have to pay more to sell their cigarettes, they're not going to want to do that. So they're going to decrease the supply. Supply will go down because now they have to pay more in taxes. So we had our starting equilibrium point, but we are shifting to the left, which is a decrease. And now we've got our new equilibrium point here, point B. Let me just draw it out. Okay, label it. Okay. So we got a different price level and a different quantity now with this leftward shift. So we're moving up from A to B. So as a result, what's happening here? Well, we're moving up the y-axis, going like this, okay, going up this way. So what happens to price? Price is increasing. So we're going to do arrow up. So price is going up. Now, next thing, quantity. As a result, A to B, we're moving to the left here on the x-axis, which is quantity. So that means that quantity is decreasing. So quantity goes down. All right, and now our last one here, number 6 over here, is a more efficient assembly line is introduced. How does this impact the automobile market? This is a supply shifter. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this would have nothing to do with how many cars people want. This is purely a production issue. So what is our shifter here? Well, in our supply column, that would be a change in technology. So as a result, if this assembly line is now more efficient, that means the car manufacturers can produce more. So their supply will increase as represented by a shift to the right. So we started here at point A, equilibrium. Now we have our rightward shift of supply. So we're going to label the new equilibrium point right here. All right, our new price. Now, what happens to, in this situation, what is happening to the price in this market? Okay, well, again, we're going from A to B here. We're moving downward on the y-axis, or excuse me, the y-axis here, which means the price is going down. So that's the downward arrow, okay? And then let's take a look at quantity real quick. All right, now quantity going from A to B means we're moving from the left to the right here on the x-axis, and that tells us that quantity is increasing. So you would circle the upward arrow. Okay, and that is it for this part of the worksheet. That's questions 1 through 6 in the markets. So hopefully that was helpful. Maybe you now understand how to do it a little better. If you were checking your answers, great. You got to see how you did. But that's it. We're all done for this worksheet. Hopefully you found that helpful. Thanks for watching.